good to go. Welcome, everyone. If this is your first time with me, this is how the session will flow today. We will go through some quick intros at the start. We'll dive right into the presentation. At the start, I mentioned since this is a session on pitching, I'd love to have all of you come off mute just to do a quick 30-second pitch. I'd love to learn more about what you are doing, either your job or your startup, or if you have any ideas that you are looking to launch. This is kind of the opportunity for you to share. And then we can dive right into the presentation. There's going to be time for Q&A during the presentation, but we'll have some time at the end as well for more questions. There's going to be a lot of content today. So again, don't worry if you find that you're missing some things. If I'm speaking too quickly, you can watch the recording as well. So some quick housekeeping before we jump to the intros. I'd love to hear your insights. So if anyone else has other things that they found work for them, don't be shy. Feel free to share. The other thing to note as well is I like to try to create a safe environment for people to share. So if anyone is coming off mute, if English is not your first language, if you have an accent, don't worry about all of that. We're trying to be welcoming here. So if you hear anyone sharing, just bear with them and be respectful, right? At the same time, if you hear that people are making excuses or not being direct and giving good feedback, do call them out on it as well. So those are some housekeeping. Otherwise, let's jump to the intros. I'd love to hear your quick 30-second pitches. And this is how you will talk about your sort of elevator pitch. What do you do? What's your background? What are you working on? And then I can jump more into the framework behind pitching, and then we can try to break it down at the end and see if I have more feedback on how you did your pitch as well. Sarah, I see that you are unmuted. Do you want to get started first?
Yes, thank you, Chin. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Sarah, and currently I'm working on an edtech project and helping millions of students, to select a major and prepare a smarter career. And currently I'm looking for a co-founder and also trying to build some traction so I can call for investment or attending some pitch competition. Yeah.
With me, this is how the session will flow today. Great, thank you for sharing, Sarah. Some quick intros at the start. Ray, did you want to go?
Or attending some pitch competition.
Yeah, Sarah is on?
Yep.
Okay, this is Ray. Yes, hi Chen. Actually, one of my co-founders also participated in this session. And yeah, both of us are starting to put together a venture startup business. We work in the pharmaceutical industry and noticed the need for scientific users to have a good access to data when they are designing the clinical trials or making decisions based on the results. This includes even the scientific reviewers in the regulatory agency like FDA. So our thinking is to provide solutions empowered by technology and standardization and automation, but at the same time with good practice knowledge base to empower the platform so people can have a easy to use environment, so they don't have to be very, like a tech savvy to be able to have information for them to derive scientific insights. So that is something we're in the startup stage, just formed the company and still recruiting some key partners, and we're starting some prototype to try this out, try our ideas.
Amazing, thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Ping, I'm assuming you are his co-founder. Is there anything else you want to add on to that?
You are calling me, right?
Yep.
Ping?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi, this is Ping. Actually, Ray and I are working on this startup 2 weeks young. We just registered 2 weeks ago. Yeah, basically, Ray and I both are veterans, almost 3 decades in the pharmaceutical industry. So we think we understand the clinical trial inside and out. So we are trying to simplify the processes and make the data processes much more transparent and visualized, utilizing the high-tech capability. And if we do well, we believe we can bring disruptive changes to the industry, to the pharmaceutical industry.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Cool. I think you would both probably get a lot out of today's session. Just so you know, today's session is pitching for hackathons, but the framework for pitching applies very strongly if you're pitching to investors as well. So down the road, if both you and Ray decide to raise capital from investors, then this is the same framework that you can apply as well. A bit about my background for those of you who are not familiar with me. I spent the last 5 years working for a social venture incubator accelerator called Spring. We focus on helping entrepreneurs from the idea stage through to the stage where they're raising capital. So we help them all the way from designing products, understanding how to test and validate the market, how to approach investors, how to raise capital. In that 5 years, I probably worked with close to 400 companies. And I've helped them all the way from the stages of launching through to actually getting investors. So I specialize personally on the sales side of things. I help them with figuring out how to price their products, sales strategy, marketing strategy, growth strategies. So that's kind of my area of focus. I've also been very involved in many startup competitions and hackathons. So some of them include Startup Weekend by Techstars. I've judged and mentored for a few of those. I've also been on the organizing side for a few different hackathons as well. And I've also been in investor judging events where I'm called in to kind of support with grading the companies, assessing the companies as well. So I think a lot of my perspective here will come both from the competition side, but also from the sort of assessment side to help you understand what judges are looking for, what advisors are looking for, and what investors are looking for. So a few areas that I want to focus on for today's session. Number one, I'm going to talk a bit about storytelling and how to help you craft a good story in your pitch. Because I think every great pitch is not just talking about stats. You make it more engaging when you can actually tell a story and through telling your story, help people really understand who is your customer, who are your competitors. And then we'll go into how to frame the elevator pitch, give you a structure for that. And then I'll talk about the main pitch or the finale pitch. So that is usually the pitch that you have maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to do. So the elevator pitch is usually about 30 seconds. The finale pitch is the longer pitch. So let's talk about storytelling. Storytelling is the key element here. And throughout all of your pitches, you should be able to tell some form of a story. Don't just talk about what you do. Don't just dump stats at people. No one will find it engaging. If you just say, hey, the market size is X billion people, or we've spoken to 10 people, like those kind of things, they are important, but if you can tell it in the form of a story, it becomes more engaging. So I want to play a video for all of you just to quickly help you see how you can frame it in the story. All right, that was about 90 seconds. And I think it gives you a clear idea. It helps you understand who it's for. So it shows you John has this problem. It paints the picture of the customer and the problem. talks about how the person would use the product. And then they talk a bit about the market size as well, right? They say there are X many, where is it? There are X many people on the planet that are like John and Lennon. So it actually does a pretty good job kind of connecting the dots and painting the picture. Normally, when you tell a story, there are two main stories to tell. You, number one, either tell the story from your perspective. Maybe it's a problem you have experienced before, maybe in your industry. Like Ping and Ray, you say you have a lot of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. If you have personally experienced a problem, you can tell your own story. If not, you tell the story from a customer's perspective. I'll try to give you some other examples. So back in 2014, I joined and participated in the Start Weekend. And one of the ideas that we were working on is we were basically building this app that will help people find dishes in the restaurant. So I'll actually tell you the pitch. It's not a perfect pitch, but I'll just give it to you so that you can see how I tell the story. So I say, hi, we are Team Pokemenu. What we have basically done over this weekend is we've gone out and we've spoken to about 25 people, and we're hearing the same trend. So this is an example of one of the stories that we hear. So John is interested in going to a restaurant. He's looking for a dish to eat. When he gets to the restaurant, the first thing that he sees is a menu. And in some cases, in some restaurants, menus are 50 pages long. So John is looking through this itemized menu, and he doesn't really know what to order. There's too many dishes on the menu. So John's alternative right now is he goes up on Yelp or he goes on Google to try to read reviews to figure out what is popular at this restaurant, or he will ask his server to recommend a dish. And after he gets a recommendation, he gets the dish and he tries it, and he hopes that it's something that he enjoys. We want to make that experience better. So we are creating an app that allows people to easily view the top dishes in a restaurant. If you open the app, it will actually show you all of the dishes ranked by popularity. And you can vote on dishes if you like a certain dish more than others. And basically, now if you go to a restaurant, you'll never get that bad experience where you end up ordering the wrong dish because you know exactly what to order. So that is what we've built. So if you notice that example over there, I'm walking through a customer story. I also use the story to tie in competitors or alternatives, right? I say, right now, how does John solve the problem? He goes on Google, he goes on Yelp, he reads the reviews, or he's going to ask the server. So that's the alternative. So that's just a high level story. Another example of a very emotional story is I remember hearing this one entrepreneur where he was designing this wearable device, and the wearable device would go on to seniors. So his stories, he would tell it like this. He said, my father-in-law is 84 years old. He lives in a senior care home right now. And what happens is when we visit him sometimes, we notice that he has rashes and infections on his body. And that happens because now that he's a bit older, he can't control his bladder movement, right? He will pee himself, he will poo himself, and the caregiver needs to notice it in time to change, or else infections will start to happen. So I've decided to create this device. It's called Wearable Therapeutics. And what it does is it will track you and notice your moisture level. So it will notify your caregiver if you need to be changed or if you need to be moved. So that is what we've created. So you can see, again, this one is telling it from a customer perspective or a user's perspective, but you can still also connect with the story and really understand what is the problem, how is the solution solving it. So the key goal with the storytelling piece is you want to help people connect to the story, because people get more excited by your pitch when they can really empathize with it, when they can see, I know someone else who has this problem, or I personally been through this problem myself. So try to figure out how you can give them the sense like, oh, that's me, or I've been there. So usually authentic stories are the best. I don't encourage you to fabricate a story. So try to find a real story. If you don't have one real story, go out, interview your customers and try to figure out what is the story in their language. Have they been through that experience before? If you need a framework, this is a rough framework that you can follow. Once upon a time, so this is how things were before. Every day, there's a frustration, that emotion, right? And then one day I took an action or a decision. Because of that, then there's a turning point, right? I finally see that now I have a solution, and ever since then, you have this positive emotion. So it takes people through that ups and downs, right? You go through every day, this is a problem. Because of that, you're frustrated. And then there's that kind of climax, the turning point, and ever since then, things are changed now. So you want to give them that rough journey in terms of a story. As you think about storytelling, my encouragement is to, if you can, paint a picture of your why in your story. Because a lot of investors or advisors, they like to hear about why you're starting a company. And the why is the strongest thing because investors know and judges know that most entrepreneurs that go out and try to start businesses at the start, they typically do it because they are looking for opportunity. So what I mean by opportunity here is they either think like, oh, no one else is doing it. I want to do it because I think I can make a lot of money with it. Or I want to be my own boss, or maybe I think I can be super flexible. I can have my own work schedule if I'm working for my own company. And those are not usually the right reasons to start a company. Not to say that they are bad reasons, but if an investor or if a judge is hearing you pitch, typically they know that those reasons will not be enough to keep you going when you face all the challenges, when you get rejected a lot by customers, by other investors. They want to know what's your personal motivation. And the why is really the strong thing. So a lot of people, when they communicate, when they pitch, they're very clear about what they do. Some of them know how they're different. Some of them know how they're different from their competitors, how they're unique. But not often do you hear people pitching about the why. And the why is so important because when people understand your why, they really understand what is the bigger cause. What are you motivated by? And this framework comes by Simon Sinek. So the example he gives is Apple. Apple is, out there, it's a really big company. We all know Apple. But if you think about it, they are creating the same products. They're creating, computer products, cell phones, same as like Samsung or, Dell or Microsoft. They have the same access to talent as well, right? They have all the same people that they can hire. They have same access to media companies, agencies. But if you notice, Apple has been able to build a very strong brand. And how they do it is the way that they communicate. So I'll give you an example here in terms of verbally saying it, and then you can picture it. So imagine if Apple communicated this way. They say, we make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, user-friendly. Do you want to buy one? So what I've effectively done is I've communicated from the outside in. So I say, we make great computers. That's the what. How? They're beautifully designed, simple to use, user-friendly. And then I don't really have a why to say, do you want to buy one? Doesn't sound very compelling, right? But if you communicate from the inside out, you say everything we do, we believe in changing the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way that we change the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. It just so happens that we are creating great computers. Do you want to buy one? You can see how this message is a lot more compelling now. It really resonates with the core mission of the company. So people understand Apple is about creativity. It's about helping people express themselves, about helping people think differently, right? At the end of the day, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And this comes from Simon Sinek. So definitely check out the full video if you like a bit more perspective on it. But when he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, it's not only your customers. It's everybody, like investors, when you're trying to find team members, co-founders, they buy into why you do things, not just what you do. There are many companies that do a lot of data services, consulting, but the why is the really strong thing that will help people resonate and rally around your cause. So try to think about how you're communicating from the why. That is the core of your message. And if you have a strong why, people will really remember what you are pitching. So I'll give an example here. This is one company that we work with when I was at Spring. It's called Nada. It's Vancouver-based. They are a grocery store, and they basically sell grocery without any packaging. So Brienne's story and how she would pitch it is she would say, I come from a background where I am a marine biologist. And one reason why I decided to start my company is I went on a scuba diving trip to Sipadan Island off the coast of Borneo. And when I was there at the island scuba diving, the water was really clear, really clean. But when I got to the shore and I looked down, I can see that the jetty is full of rubbish. So as a marine biologist, I'm really passionate about helping reduce plastic waste. So I've decided that the best place to start that is by reducing plastic at the packaging level at the grocery stores. That is why I've started this company called Nada. So she paints her why into the picture, and it gives you a clear idea of like, what is the problem? What is the frustration there? Make sense? So that's Brienne's story. just to give you a sense of how she started, because I think a lot of you might be curious as you're starting new companies as well. Right now, she has been operating the business since 2014, so 6 years now. This year is her 3rd year with the retail location. Last year, when I last spoke to her, she had already made $2 million in revenue. So I'm thinking she's probably on trend for about $4 million this year, unless things have changed with COVID. But just to give you a sense of where she started, when she approached us in 2014, it was an idea in her head. She had no business background, and she was just a marine biologist. And she just said, hey, I want to start this. I have no idea how to do it. So if you are daunted by the task of starting a tech company, imagine what she's doing here. She's starting a retail company. She has to lease a location. There's a lot of cost that goes into renovating. She has to buy product. She has to hire employees. So how did she start? Just to give you a picture of her story, she started by actually doing some validation. So the first thing that we recommend that she do is she go out there and test and see if the community in Vancouver is ready for something like this. It's been done before in other countries. There are other zero waste grocery stores, but she wasn't sure if people in Vancouver cared enough about this to change their behavior. So what she did is she started a Facebook group, and the Facebook group was Zero Waste Vancouver. And it was a closed group, and she invited people into the group who were interested in living a lifestyle with minimal waste. So what that did is it helped her build her initial community, and it helped her rally people around the cause. So if you notice, what she did very well there is, when you build a community, you don't want to brand it around your company. You brand it around the mission, around the cause. People get excited by that. And that's how her community grew. Now it's about close to, I think, 10,000 people in the group now. And then after that, she decided to run pop-up shops. So she would actually go to farmers markets. She partnered up with different retail locations like Patagonia, where she would have a booth and she would just sell different products at the booth to test and see what products to carry, what products were in demand. That helped her also build up her initial customer list. And then eventually, once she got to a stage where she had enough customers, she was ready to start to open up the retail location. And it was a lot easier for her to go to the bank to borrow money, because now it wasn't just an idea. She could actually tell the bank, I have customers. Every week we do this. We're making about $3,500 on a weekend just by running these pop-up shops. So it de-risked the opportunity for both banks and investors. So as you think about that, just think about how can you take those baby steps to eventually build that momentum. Because when you're pitching to investors, when you're pitching to judges as well, they want to hear those stories about your progress. They want to hear how have you actually gone out, tested the market, how have you been creative and resourceful around validating if there's a demand for your product or service. So I'll give more examples throughout the presentation, but I want to focus more on the storytelling piece. So I'll show you another video. And this one is another company here. I think they got acquired, so they sold the company.
You know how my brother moved his investments to Questrade?
Sorry, ad. Oh my God, 30-second ad. I'll let the ad play for a second. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the ad, any questions so far?
Yeah, this is good.
Great. Yeah, same thing. If you have questions at any time, feel free to type in the chat as well. I'm just gonna jump to her pitch over here. 40. All right, I want to let you hear her describe it in her words.
Live more normal lives.
Danny, a little boy with autism, he was able to actually eat at a restaurant for the first time with his family without, having to be removed and calmed down, because he was wearing his vest, and his family said it was the most enjoyable dinner that they've ever had.
Sajjan's been wearing his snug vest for several months now. Sometimes he likes to wear it even when he's not feeling upset. But nothing quite replaces the calming effect of a mother's touch.
So I'm not going to play the full video, but just to help you understand the product, she's invented this vest where it's more for autistic children. And what happens is when these children have anxiety issues or an anxiety attack, it helps that they are hugged. When they are hugged, they calm down. So the vest is basically an inflatable vest. When they feel anxious or stressed, they can press a button and the vest will inflate and it will give them the sensation of being hugged. and it really helps these autistic children calm down and be in those kind of social situations where they won't panic, they won't freak out, they won't throw a tantrum. So if you notice there, what I just played for you is she's talking about a customer kind of story. And those are really the strongest stories when you can really help people understand how people actually use your solution to actually solve a problem. The reason why I'm focusing so much on this aspect of storytelling is I find that a lot of pitches, I notice that they tend to they tend to start with like very high level stuff. They will say like, there are X many cases of depression every year. Or they might say, oh, right now, food waste is a big problem. Don't go so high level. So that's what I call a macro problem. You have your micro problem, which is your customer problem. And then there's a global problem, which is like, what is the bigger picture problem? I find that the most effective pitches are pitches that start at the lower level on the micro side. If you start and talk about that high big picture problem, people start to think like, okay, so what? How will your solution actually solve that? So for example, you might say, hey, there's a big issue with food waste. When you say that, people will just think, of course, but how will your solution solve that? So instead, you might want to focus more on like, oh, right now, there's a lot of food that goes bad in the grocery store. And when it's going bad, it's expiring soon. Grocery store owners need to figure out how to get rid of it, right? So if you paint the story from that perspective, I'm brought down to a low level. I understand how your solution will actually solve that rather than painting too big or broad of a picture. So just make sure you tell that customer story there. Don't be afraid of telling, your stories of mistakes that you made. I find that when you do this, when you share the lessons that you've learned with both investors and judges, it really helps build trust, and it kind of gives them the sense that you are, number one, coachable, you are open, you are not afraid of actually telling things for what it is. It doesn't actually make you weak, right? As a matter of fact, it strengthens the people around you. So it's good. Just make sure that you're thoughtful about what you share. You don't want to share things that are too obviously bad and make you look bad. But if it's stories that are failures about your customers or your investors that don't discredit you, then feel free to share it. I'm just going to check for a question. I think someone typed in chat. Let me see here. Business. Henry says, I have a business that is validated, but the product is not complete. Would it qualify for a pitch? It depends. Henry, would you care to come off mute to quickly do a quick pitch? Just to help me understand a bit better on what exactly you're doing.
Yes, hello, yes. I would love to do a pitch. Unfortunately, I don't even have the slides prepared.
Oh, don't have to.
I would love to. Thank you so much for asking me, but I would love to do it. Are you going to do this again in about a week?
This is, no, unfortunately not. So next
Such a great program. It's so informative. So,
Yeah, but maybe if you give me a high level, like 30-second pitch, don't have to go into the details of exactly how your solution works, but what exactly are you working on?
Well, it's a way to deter and to control the COVID virus, actually. And it's a whole program behind it. Actually, there's a product that's the flagship product that's going to spearhead this whole project. We have a beta website. So right now it still needs a lot of work. I'm just wondering, because of the sensitive issue, would it be, and because of the excitement about this whole thing, and it's going to be solving a lot of issues, can it go in front of investors, and would it be a lucrative something that they might be interested in investing in? Or should I reserve and work on the website and the product prior to approaching investors?
Yeah, great question. And if I may dig deeper, I'm trying to understand what might be underlying that. Is it a concern that you're worried that people might steal the idea? Is that kind of one of the concerns that's behind that deal?
Yes, and the product actually, because of this such a sensitive issue, you have to prove that your claims and everything, that all your testing, it actually works in a real world scenario. So I think that type of validation for the product itself is vital before anybody's willing to even give you a penny, I would say.
Yeah, good question. So where I would put that is it depends on why you might want to pitch to an investor. And first off, maybe let's do a high level on whether or not you should raise capital from investors first. So first off, if you're thinking about launching the company, there are usually two routes. One is you bootstrap, i.e. use your own capital, use revenue from customers, or the other option is to raise capital from investors and go down the venture capital route. Both options are viable. Both have their own pros and cons. It really depends on the type of business that you want to grow. So I say that the main factor that influences whether or not you go with one or the other depends on what is your end vision of the company. Usually, if you raise money from investors, you have to know that investors will want to push you to grow and scale the company, because that's how they get their money back, right? They get their money back when you get acquired, or if you go public, IPO, or if you raise future rounds of funding where another investor buys them out. So if you don't plan on growing it into a global company, that's absolutely fine. Some people are just trying to build a lifestyle company, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to build a lifestyle company, you might not want to raise capital from investors. So that's just something to think about. So now that you have figured that out, let's say, assuming you say, yes, I want to build a global company, I need capital from investors, then the next best step is you want to think about how much you want to raise and what the capital is going to be used for. So typically fundraising is broken down into a few stages. So we have the pre-seed, and then we have the seed round, which is the first round of formal investment. And then we have Series A, Series B, Series C, and so on and so forth. Each series that you go down, basically, you're just raising more and more money. But one thing to know is, depending on how much you want to raise, you will position yourself as either being a pre-seed or seed at the early stage. So what I mean by that is, let's say if you say I want to raise 250,000, and you're thinking that most of the money is going to be used for product development, maybe hiring some team members, validating the market, then I would advise you to focus more on positioning yourself to private investors. Maybe it's going to be friends and family, or maybe just one or two angel investors. It's not going to be a formal round of funding. If you say you want to raise anywhere from, upwards of 250 to about $1.5 million. So if you say, hey, I want to raise maybe $500,000 or 750,000, then you want to position yourself as a formal raise where you're actually doing a real round. And when you do a real round, you're typically raising from anywhere from 6 to 12 investors. And these are usually accredited investors, professional investors that regularly invest. That's where it becomes a bit more formal. That's where you need to have the right paperwork. You need to have the right structure. Well, as a matter of fact, pre-seed, you also need to have the right paperwork. But just slightly different in terms of how you position yourself. So when you are sharing, the number one thing is when you decide, should I pitch or not, I typically encourage people on a high level, don't worry too much about people stealing your idea. The reason why I say that is because when you do this type of investor pitches, you don't want to give away the entire cow. So to speak, what you're doing is any good pitch should incite questions. If your pitch covers everything about your business from start to finish and people have no questions at the end of the pitch, you have actually not done a good job pitching. And the reason why is because you don't know who's interested in the room, and you basically overwhelm people, right? So a good pitch is a pitch where you deliberately omit certain information, but of course, don't omit the important things. Like if you know that you're in a very competitive space, you might have to talk about competitors, but you might deliberately omit, let's say you might just say, I'm raising capital, but you might not say how much. So you might say, we've already made some revenue, but you might not say how exactly you made the revenue. So you might deliberately leave some pieces out to see if people bite. And you might not go into the details. Well, as a matter of fact, you should not go into the details of how exactly you do things. So what I mean by that is you can talk about the what, but you don't need to go into the detail of like the technicalities, how it actually works, the patenting behind that, the special algorithms that you use, the AIs that you use, things like that. So if you're just sharing the what, that should be good enough. And that shouldn't be enough that people can steal your idea. If you're sharing the what and you're worried that people can steal your idea just from that, I would actually encourage you to think that your idea is probably being done somewhere else in the world by someone as well, even though they might not have launched yet. So maybe you can't find them as well. But you're probably not as unique as you think you are. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
That's really good advice, actually. I did do a search and trying to find a competitor or anybody else that has a similar product. But you're right. If your product isn't unique enough to describe and if it's too simple of an idea, it's most likely it's going to probably be being manufactured or developed by somebody else.
Yeah, but also don't be discouraged by that, because I find that I've seen a lot of companies be very successful just by starting on day one and being exactly the same as competitors. There's nothing wrong with starting by being the same. But the clear thing is, when you are pitching, you need to be able to communicate on how you want or plan to be different down the road, even if you're not different right now. So you can start and be absolutely identical. I've seen a few companies do that, but they have a very compelling pitch on how they will be different, and that's what investors buy into. So.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm going to be actually finishing my pitch in the coming week. And if anything, I would like to just send it to you so you can take a look at the video and you can possibly, critique it.
Yeah, happy to provide feedback. So this goes to everyone else as well. If anyone wants to send me their pitches, if they want some quick feedback, I'm happy to jump in and make some comments. So key piece of advice before I actually show you the format of a pitch is you don't need to follow a format. I really encourage this because you will at any point in your life go through different workshops and kind of sessions where they talk about how to best pitch. There is no one best way to pitch. So I don't encourage you to stick to a rigid script or format, because every pitch should be different. There are certain buckets that you need to fill, certain things that you need to talk about. For example, your customer, your problem, your competitor sometimes, your team, but not everything is absolutely required. Because like I mentioned, you might deliberately omit certain things depending on how you're trying to strategically incite some questions from your audience. Or sometimes you want to focus on talking about your stronger points first as well. So we'll go into that. But this is a quick format for those of you who are really struggling to wrap your head around how to structure your pitch. This is the elevator pitch. This is typically the 30-second pitch, or if you meet someone and they say, hey, tell me about what you're doing, and you don't want to bore them with a long 3-minute pitch. So this is 30, 60 seconds, high level. So what you want to do is, when you're planning for your pitches, the first thing to remember is you should have different versions of your pitches depending on what you're using it for. So if you are trying to start a business, if you're trying to recruit team members, if you're trying to find investors, if you want to win a hackathon, so it really all depends on your goals, right? If you have different goals, the way you pitch will be slightly different. For example, if you're trying to get investors excited, maybe you might focus more on talking about your progress. How many customers do you have? Any letters of intent or proposals you signed? If you're focusing on recruiting team members, you might emphasize more on your team culture. Maybe you'll talk more about how quickly your company is growing and the opportunity for getting promoted and learning new skills. So it really depends on what your goal is. But start by figuring out your goal, then you can work backwards to craft the script from that. Like I mentioned, you're not trying to answer all questions. You're not trying to also close people in the first pitch. So it goes for investors as well. You're not trying to get someone to invest in your company in the first interaction. Same with hiring someone. You just want to get them interested. So I talked a bit about this, how much to share, what if people steal my idea. So I'm not going to cover that. So problem, I talked about this. Maybe I'll give you a quick example here again. So SnugVest, which you all saw the video, the macro problem, high level, is helping people with autism and spectrum disorders. That is very high level. People don't understand that. On a micro level, it's how do I manage a stress event? So when a kid is going through that anxiety attack, how do they deal with that, right? So that's a micro level problem. The other one at the bottom is Food Mesh, another Vancouver-based company. So the macro problem is they say 40% of food is wasted, right? That's not the right way to start the pitch. The micro is they talk about grocery stores have a lot of food that is expiring soon. What do they do with that? They've created a platform that allows grocery stores to do flash sales and connect them with restaurants that need bulk ingredients. So that way you can see, okay, now the solution is speaking to a problem, and it's not just like solution here, problem up here, right? I want to quickly show you this video, and then we can go into some examples for elevator pitches and the actual template. But this video, pay attention to what he's talking about that goes on behind the scenes for the customers. It's really about the motivation behind using a product or service.
Hi, my name's Clay Christensen. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. I brought with me a set of puzzles, all related to innovation. We decided that the way we teach marketing is at the core of what makes motivation difficult to achieve. The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I want to just tell you a story about a project we did for one of the...
Sorry, Ping, did you say louder?
Yeah, it's too low, the voice.
Okay, let me see if I can adjust that. Give me a second.
Big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. They'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunkier, chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no...
Sorry? Sorry, is that loud enough?
There's no voice now.
Oh, no voice? Huh, that's strange. Does everyone have the same problem, or is that just Ping?
Yeah, we can hear it, but just the volume is low on the low end.
I'm not too sure what else I can adjust for it.
That's okay. Your voice are very good, but this video.
Maybe what I'll do is I'll speak about it then, so I won't actually have you watch the video. So one of the key takeaways from it is he talks a bit about how this one company was trying to improve their milkshakes. So they're selling milkshakes, and the idea there is they were doing a lot of research, and people were saying different things about like, oh, we want different flavors, or the packaging needs to be different. And they tested different things, but it looked like sales was still about the same. And they realized that they did some research, and they actually went out to a store and actually looked at customers when they were buying milkshakes, and they found that most of the milkshakes were bought before 8 a.m. in the morning. And they noticed as well that when they approached those people who were buying the milkshakes and asked them, you know, when was the last time you had to do something similar, and instead of buying a milkshake, you bought something else? And they realized that the jobs to be done behind it was that people who were buying milkshakes weren't buying it because of flavor. So you might think that your product is solving one thing, but usually there's an inherent motivation behind that. And the jobs to be done here is people are buying milkshakes because they are driving to work, and they need something that is going to last them for quite a while during the drive, you know, about 20 minutes or so, and it's going to make them full during the drive. And then they say sometimes before I buy a milkshake, I will eat maybe a banana. But banana, you know, a few minutes, it's gone, and then I'm still hungry. Or sometimes they say, oh, I'll buy a donut, but I feel guilty about that. It's not healthy. Or I will try to eat a bagel, but it's too difficult to do that while I'm driving. So they understand like, oh, there's other motivations behind that. So then what they did to improve the product is focus more on making it more viscous, more thicker, so that it takes longer time for them to drink, or having more nutrition in the milkshake so it can replace your breakfast. So other things that maybe you don't normally think of, because sometimes when you interview customers, they themselves don't know it. So you have to actually go out and figure out what's the motivation behind it. So I think the same thing is when you think about your solution as well, what is the motivation behind why they might need it? So for example, in your case, Ping and Ray, like why might someone need to actually use this? What are they trying to accomplish? Do they want faster matches? Do they want, does it help them serve more customers? Does it help them do more research? Like what is the background motivation behind that?
Yeah, this is a good example. Yeah.
I'll share the link to the video so you can watch it on your own time. But again, in a nutshell here is a lot of companies tend to focus on selling the product. And this great example is, you know, it's like Mario, the game. Mario gets the flower, your product. Mario is your customer. The flower is your product. And Mario becomes Super Fire Mario when he has your product. This is what you're selling. You are selling the value proposition. And the painful example here is a friend of mine, his mom had a heart attack. And she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you have a heart attack, you need to eat more healthily, you need to exercise more. But she didn't actually listen to the doctor, and she still had another heart attack. And the reason why that happened is because doctors, people who tend to be in prescriptive positions, they tend to tell you what you need, not what you want. So the sales analogy here is, in sales, we say, sell them what they want, give them what they need. Had the doctor said, you want to spend more time with your family, you want to see your grandkids, that will actually motivate his mom a lot more than just saying, hey, you need to eat healthily, you need to exercise more. Does that make sense? So what is the value proposition that your product or service enables your customer to do? So think about how you can communicate that. So for the elevator pitch, the main framework I want to introduce to you is what I call permission-based pitching. And I'll show you what it looks like. But the core thing is, you need to start with the what, not the why. You'll go into the why later, but you start with the what, because when you have only about 30 seconds to 60 seconds to pitch to someone, they need to be able to walk away and remember what exactly you do, so that they can start to make referrals to you or reconnect with you or search you up. If they don't remember what you do, if they remember your amazing story, but they don't remember your solution, then you've probably done a bad job with your pitch. So this is the framework here. What are you providing? What's your solution? How is it unique? How is it different? Who is it for? And then what you want to try to do is you want to stop there. So what, how, who, you stop there. And then if they're interested, they will dig deeper. Then you have the permission to actually talk to them about the opportunity or the problem or why you're doing it, your team, your competitors, things like that. So I'll give you an example. So Harley Davidson, motorcycle. This is an example pitch, it's not their real pitch, but they are the only motorcycle company that makes cruiser motorcycles for rebels and rebel wannabes, right? And then they stop there. Why? Who want to join a gang of rebels? Where in the United States, in an era of decreasing personal freedom. So that's an example of a pitch. So at the end of the day, if you had stopped at what, how, and who, I still understand what is your company. Make sense? So I'll give an example, and then I want to give you all some time to do an exercise to build your own pitch as well. So Airbnb, what is it? An accommodation sharing service that lets you stay in someone else's house for technologically savvy millennial travelers. And then once people understand that, they might get more curious, they might ask why, then you can say, hey, people want to experience living like a local, or experiencing the comfort of home. Where, in anywhere throughout the world, although they started in the US, when during a time where there's an increasing demand for variety, right? So I hope that gives you a rough understanding of the framework. I want to get you to try doing this right now for a fictional company. So don't do it for your own company, because I find that when I start this exercise and I get people to do it for their own company, people get too caught up with the granularities. People tend to think that, oh, there's so much important stuff I want to talk about. So I want you to create an imaginary pitch. Look around your room right now. So you're all at home. It can be anything. It can be like a pen, it can be a book, it can be a mouse, anything that you see within your field of vision. Pick an item and build a pitch for that. It can be completely fictional. You can say, oh, I have this magical pen and it writes ink that is invisible and no one can see it, right? So you might say, this is the only magical pen that can write invisible ink for people who want to communicate without letting others know what their thoughts are, for example. So I want you to try to design a pitch around that. Don't use the same one that I just gave you, but look around your room. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do this. Pick an item and then try to fill in the blanks over here. Wait, one more minute. All right. I hope you all are ready to do your pitches. Maybe I'll give you one example. And this is one that I just came up on the spot. If you think it's a good idea, feel free to steal it. I really don't care. I have too many ideas all the time. But what I'm pitching is the only webcam that allows you to look at the webcam while seeing a screen for people who run a lot of virtual workshops or virtual meetings. And then so that's where I stop, what, how, who, people might get curious, right? So then they might ask more. Then I say, this is something that people need because right now, the challenge is when you have a virtual meeting on Zoom, or if you run a workshop, people are looking at the screens to look at the participant instead of looking at the webcam to actually look at the audience. And that really creates that bad experience. You probably see this now where I'm reading off the screen or looking at the screen instead of looking at the camera and looking at you. So that's why it's needed, especially in this time of COVID, where there are more and more people moving to virtual meetings. It's really creating that disconnect in experience because people don't feel like they're really looking at each other. And this solution that I'm creating will allow people to do that. So that's an example of a pitch. Does anyone want to share one example of their fictional pitch?
I can share just a very simple.
Yeah, I can do it as well.
Yeah, I have a desk light. It's close to perfect. So I think it is very simple. It's the design very slim. It's like a upside L with a stand at the bottom. But what's unique about this is that you can actually control the degree of the light, how strong or how weak you can do, and also the color of the light. You can get a warmer or cooler side kind of light, and can also adjust where it can reach. So I think here for current people work from home, this is so beautiful. It gives you all the function, but it does not give you this dull office look. So I think it would be popular if I really introduce this to both customers.
Great. I think that's a pretty good start. Pretty simple framework, easy to understand and short. Cool. Henry, did you want to give your example?
Absolutely. My name is Henry with Meditech, and we're the only medical company that produces transport devices that take away your cancer cells by transporting them out of your body. And these are for all cancer patients.
That's interesting. Yeah, that will actually definitely make me want to learn more. So, good start.
Yeah, this is Ray. Let me try.
Sure.
Yeah, just look at this the Bluetooth earphone. You don't have to put it into your ears, so you can put it around it, so without covering your ear, so you can still, let your ear breathe and hear other things, but at the same time you can listen to, from the earphone speaker, and also you can speak towards it, and that is something, comfort, and also when people they don't want to wear the ear plug all the time, and that is really better alternative.
Who is it for?
This for people, any people who, like listen to something when they put a lot of time, put the earphone on them, like doing jogging or, like doing exercise, but listening to music or listening to stories and things. Yeah.
Great. So if you notice that I had to ask you who, because in your original pitch, you kind of alluded to it, but it wasn't very clear. So when you talk about the who, you want to try to focus on the functional use. So for example, like in your case, you might say for people who are jogging, or you might say people who are working at a construction site, maybe because they need to hear something happen around them, right? So then it becomes more practical. They can see how it's relevant to the solution.
Yeah.
Cool. Great examples. I think we can move on. So maybe let's talk about the actual pitch. So your 3 to 5 minute pitch if you have a bit more time. And again, remember, this is a framework. You don't have to follow it exactly. Customized based on what you're trying to convey in your message. So number one is the most important thing is, as you think about customizing your pitch, you always want to start with your strongest point. So your strongest point will be different. Every team has something that is different, right? Sometimes it is your progress. Maybe you might start by saying, oh, we already have, WeWork working for us. We already have Rogers as one of our clients. Or you might start with, let's say if you have a really painful problem, like let's say with Henry's case, X many people are diagnosed with COVID right now. We have a solution for it. Then immediately people become interested, right? So start with the strongest point. Sometimes it's your problem, sometimes it's your demo, sometimes it's your traction, sometimes it's your market. Really depends. I'll give you one example. When I was in Madrid teaching a bunch of university students, one of the MBA programs, they designed an MVP and they started by showing the MVP instead of pitching. And that was because that was their strongest point. And I think that really blew people away, because what they had as their MVP is they actually showed that they had design in WhatsApp. Basically, you can join this WhatsApp group. And once you join the WhatsApp group, they will automatically send you every day recommendation of different menus that are close to you. Because what happens in Madrid is restaurants in Madrid tend to use daily features a lot. They have different menus because the chefs like to cook based on current ingredients, current availability. So that was their demo. So that was the strongest point. So they started by showing, scan the QR code, you join right away the functionality, and then you get a message and you can see it's somewhere that's relevant and close to you. So they actually showed, hey, the MVP works. So that was what they use. Another example is there's this Vancouver company called Arbutus Medical. They're a medical device company. And what Lawrence would do, he's the co-founder and the current CEO, he would actually start by showing a picture. That is his strongest point. And the picture actually shows you where he's in Africa and they're in the operating room, and you can actually see a doctor using a hand drill, one of those hardware drills that you use at home to do construction and drilling. And the doctor is using that drill to operate on a patient to drill the bone. And that is a painful point to really bring. That's the strongest point, because that really shows that in these developing countries, in places where access to medical devices is not readily available, it's really expensive. They don't have access to the right tools, right? So he's painting the strongest point as the painful problem. So whatever you start with, use it as your strongest point. So this is the overall framework. These are, think of it more as buckets that you need to fill rather than you need to go in this order. It doesn't have to be in this order. So normally you start with the intro. Every pitch should talk a bit about the problem. While you talk about the problem, you also have to cover who has it, right? It has to be relevant. And then you talk about the solution. When you talk about the solution, you don't need to go into too much detail, but you need to give enough so that people understand how it works, or at least what it is. When you talk about opportunity, the reason why I say market size is optional is I've heard a lot of pitches, and I've never seen a pitch where someone says they have a small market size. Everyone always says their market is like few $1 billion, few $1 million, right? So investors are sick and tired of hearing market size pitches. I encourage you instead to focus more on traction. So more on the bottoms up. What have you done so far? Where are you in progress? Have you built things? Do you have pilot customers? Do you have early customers? So that's the market validation piece. Business model, how are you going to make money? That's going to be important if you're pitching to investors. It will probably be important if you're pitching in a competition as well. Why you? Why now? So if you're able to speak to this, the key areas that you want to focus on are trends. So you might talk about things like, generational shifts. Baby boomers are not in the workforce anymore. Now it's millennials. Or you might talk about the shift to virtual with COVID. So what are some of the trends? Maybe you might talk about your motivation, your personal story. Maybe you might talk about how you're different from your competitors or how you will prevent them from copying you down the road, right? So what is the relevant pieces here? Or maybe it's you have a special or unique team. So those are some of the key areas to focus on when you talk about why you or why now. And then lastly, whatever pitch you do, you always want to have an ask. And the reason why this is so important is I've seen a lot of people pitch and they just say, this is what we do, and then they end the pitch. Like, what's the ask? This is your opportunity. If you're already engaging in storytelling and you're putting yourself out there, you might as well put an ask. Maybe you might say something like, we are looking to raise if you are ready for fundraising. If you're not, you can say we're looking for advice. Maybe we're looking for advisors. Maybe we're looking to hire. Maybe we're looking for team members. We are looking to find early pilot customers. So it really depends, but have an ask. So I talked a bit about market size. This is the traditional way of doing it, and this is what business schools will teach you. I don't encourage that you do that. So just if you're curious, this is timestamp SOM and PM. What it stands for is total available market, service available market, service obtainable market, and penetrated market. For example, you might say like the size of the pharmaceutical industry is $5 billion industry. Then service attainable market is you say, oh, I'll focus on pharmaceuticals in Canada, for example, and that is a $10 million market. And you might say, oh, I think we can capture 5% of the market, right? So that's your service obtainable market. And penetrated market is how much do you have right now? So I don't generally recommend top down when you talk about market size. I recommend more bottoms up. So bottoms up might look something like this. Or if I actually walk you through another example, it might look like, you might say right now, we have one sales rep, and that sales rep can make 10 calls a day and close 2 customers. And each customer is worth $2,000, for example. So in 1 week, our sales rep can close X many sales. So if we raise capital and we hire 2 more sales reps, now we can scale this way. So it helps people really understand on a granular level, step by step, how will your company grow? Because when you try to do top down and bottoms up market sizing, if you are realistic with how you actually do your projections, they should meet. Because I've seen some companies, they say, oh, this is the size of the market. We think we will capture 0.5% of the market. And they think that 0.5% sounds very conservative, but 0.5% of the market might mean that within 1 year, they'll have to grow to a 200 person company because they're trying to get maybe, let's say, 50,000 customers. So it might not be realistic, right? So it's better to paint a picture from the bottoms up. This helps people really understand how you scale. So I won't go into that too much because there's a lot of other workshops on how to do financial projections. More on competition. So competition here, you want to think about not only direct competitors, but also indirect competitors. So when I say indirect competitors, I want you to think about all the other alternatives as well. So for example, like pen and paper could be an alternative. So instead of using spreadsheets and Excel or maybe AI, maybe right now people are doing it manually, right? Or maybe, for example, if you say, I want to start a coffee shop, so coffee shop is your solution, you might think, oh, Starbucks is my competitor. Starbucks is a direct competitor, but there are indirect competitors as well. When someone wants to take a break, instead of going to a coffee shop, maybe they might go somewhere else. They might go to a park, maybe they might go to movie theater. So what are some of the other existing alternatives? You might also start to think about future or past competitors. Maybe there is another company that used to be doing this but has moved out of the market or evolved away. If that is the case, you want to be able to speak to why they have moved out of that market. Maybe they moved out of the market because there's no demand for it. Or maybe they moved out of market because they found a more lucrative market, right? And does that mean that your market is bad? Who knows? So you just need to be able to address that if the question comes up. Same with future competitors. If you know that, let's say, Walmart might move into your space, then you want to be able to address that as well. But don't worry too much about competitors being a bad thing. It's actually good to talk about competitors. investors actually don't like to hear people say, I'm first in market. Because when you say, we are going to be first in the market, to an investor, that means risky, right? Because you're doing something brand new, it's not proven. The best way to comfort an investor is to show them that there is demand and there is low risk. That means you're trying to prove that there are other people that are doing it. The quick comments here is, if you're wondering about how you can position yourself to be different, these are my recommendations. So these are the 3 things that you can do to position yourself as different from the competitors. Number 1, focus on building a strong brand. So you might talk about brand equity and trust, because when you launch quickly and you start to build your reputation in the community for your whatever product you're servicing, then that helps solidify that your brand is a strong and reputable brand. And even if someone tries to copy you, it doesn't matter. They trust your brand, right? Like even if someone tries to copy Nike right now, they know that Nike products have better quality and they're less likely to buy the counterfeit products. So if you have something that is easily copyable, you want to focus on building a strong brand behind it. So always focus on, like, I mean, it's something for the future, but don't undervalue your brand. I've seen some companies where they say like, oh, you know what, we'll have a small logo, or there's no branding and it can be white labeled. Those kind of things make it easier for someone to copy your product or service. So it depends, right? Sometimes you might want to go down a franchising strategy or white labeling strategy, but do know that in the long run, those are brands that will easily get copied, so it's a bit dangerous. Number 2, create a community. If you can focus on integrating with a community, it becomes harder for a competitor to copy your idea, because they have to steal people away from your community and put them into their community, which is difficult, because once you build a community, people build relationships, they're connected, and they're used to speaking to the same people. So, you know, in Ray and Ping's case, since you're doing something pharmaceutical related, maybe it's connecting people who work in the pharmaceutical industry together, or maybe it's connecting pharmacy owners together, right? Because once they get to know each other and they're sharing within the community, they are less likely to want to move to another community. Integrate is another big one. So if you can figure out how to, not only with your solution, but even with your entire company, integrate more into a user's life, then the less likely they are to switch. So Apple does a really great job of this. You can see Apple now, they're basically trying to do everything, right? It's not just the iPhone, they have the, you know, iTunes, podcasts, they have even they're moving towards smart devices for your home as well. And the idea here is, if you move away now, it's going to be more difficult because you have to think about all the other pieces that will break apart. So let's say, for example, if you have a HR solution, you say, oh, we help people with managing their applications for their jobs. And if you say, oh, our solution can also help you with dealing with payroll, paying your employees. Our solution will also help you with performance management. And now it's integrated more deeply. And if someone is considering an alternative solution for tracking their applications, they also need to think about all the other pieces that will break apart if they switch away from you. So eventually you want to try to integrate more. But again, you don't have to start by doing this. This is just something to plan for. Maybe any questions before I talk about traction and progress? Any questions on competitors?
No, they're good.
Good. Cool. So traction and progress, I actually think this is the most important slide or most important piece to talk about. And when I say piece, you don't have to limit yourself to one slide per category. You can have few slides. At the end of the day, make your slides or your visuals complement you. Don't try to fit your pitch into the slide. Let the slides fit you. So traction and progress, the reason why it's the most important is for any competition, or even if you're pitching to an investor, this is what they're usually looking for the most. They want to hear, what have you done? What have you learned? So these are the things you want to highlight. What are your metrics? How are they evolving? What do you learn? What do you change? They want to see how coachable you are. They want to see that you're actually willing to admit that you've made mistakes, right? So how can you frame it? Just think about what are the key things that you talk about, and it will help to use a timeline, because sometimes you want to be able to show that you're not only hitting milestones, but you're hitting milestones quickly as well. So if you can set it out in a timeline, it helps people visualize that, oh, it's happening very quickly. Like you launched this month, and 2 weeks later, you've incorporated the company, and another 2 weeks, you have your first customer. People can feel the momentum behind it now. Other things you can talk about include, so you can talk about sales, user, product development, marketing, PR and media. So if you've been covered in the news, you can talk about team, if you've hired or added to your team. These are things that you can highlight in the progress section. So yeah, I think I talked about that. Pre-orders, letter of intents, pilot programs, those are other things to talk about as well. So I think I mentioned this. Revenue model, sorry, I'm going to take a quick sip. When you talk about revenue model, you want to be clear about your main stream of revenue. I've seen people pitch and they say, oh, we're going to do subscription. We're also going to sell the data. We'll also do some ads, and we'll also do a freemium model, right? When you say too many things, it doesn't give people the confidence that you know exactly what your main revenue stream is. It makes it too complicated. So it doesn't mean that you can't have multiple revenue models. It is important to diversify, but there are other things that will come later. You need to be able to communicate what is your main revenue model. So when you try to talk about revenue model, I'd say limit to 1 to 2 revenue models. Don't have too many. Of course, you can elaborate. You can say later down the road when we collect enough data, we can sell the data as well, or maybe we can open up to advertising, whatever it is.
Hey, Chin, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So in a different stage of the company, when they're more mature, their revenue model may shift.
Yep.
At the beginning, maybe some, not a very mainstream business, revenue model as compared to the product is more mature.
Yep.
So what would be the strategy to pace that? It would be focus on the first couple of steps, what the major revenue versus what is the ultimate when things are more in the mid-stage success.
Yeah, good question. It depends on whether or not the approach is temporary or if it's long-term. So what I mean by that is, if you started and you know that eventually this will be your, let's say subscription is going to be your main revenue model, but you can't start with that because right now you have to do maybe like quotation based or maybe it's project based, right? It's absolutely okay to actually talk about the subscription because you know that is the main way that you will scale. And that's what investors are interested in. They want to hear how will you scale. So you don't have to talk too much about like right now it's quotation and project based. You can say like we already have customers, we've already made X amount of revenue. So that's where you talk about money in the progress piece, but you don't actually talk about your current revenue model. Make sense?
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Team is, I have a lot of mixed feelings about the team slide. The reason why I say that is team is an important slide. It needs to be in every presentation. But the challenge here is that not every startup has a strong team. Because of that, the reason why you have to have the team slide is in any competition or when you're speaking to an investor, investors care about your team a lot. And the reason why it's so important is because they know that your business will pivot, will evolve. They want to know who is on the team because by knowing you, that's who they're investing into. They want to trust you, trust that you will be a good steward of their money, that that you will actually manage their money well. And they know that you can actually be coachable, can evolve, and deal with all the challenges that you have. So you have to talk about the team at some point. But if you don't have a strong team, of course, you're not going to start the first slide and talk about your team, right? If you have Elon Musk on your team, then sure, you can talk about your team at the first slide. But if not, you can push it to later. When you talk about the team, my recommendation here is usually what investors are looking for is they, number one, want to know that you're not solo. Because if you're doing things by yourself, there's a lot of risk. If you, God forbid, come down with COVID or you get hit by a bus, then the business disappears, their investment goes poof, right? So they want to know that it's being diversified, that there are other people who can take it up if something happens to you. And then the second thing is they want to know that you have diversity in skills, that not everyone is tech or not everyone is business. So you might say, oh, we have this person doing design, this person doing business, sales, someone doing, service or the tech, whatever it is. But the idea is they just want to see that there's diversity in the team. You don't need to talk about titles. You don't need to talk about past experience. You only highlight it if it's relevant. So for example, Let's say if you are, in Ping or Ray's case again, because you both have a very clear example. If you're in the pharmaceutical industry, let's say if you have a team member who works for, let's say, Shoppers, used to work for Shoppers, maybe you might highlight that because that team member can actually help people understand how you might get into these customers because that member has experience working with those clients, right? So you might highlight it if it's relevant. Or another example might be if you have an investor on your team, maybe you can say, hey, this person is an investor. He's familiar with fundraising, right? Or if you have an experienced developer, then maybe you might highlight, oh, this person used to work for EA Games and has made a lot of games before. So he or she can make a good game for us as well. So if it's relevant, bring it up. You can also use the team slide to talk about your extended team. So what I mean by extended team here is you can talk about people who will join you if you will raise capital as well. Because sometimes you are not able to hire people right now. So you might say to an investor, we've spoken to this person, John or Amy, and they will join our team if we can close a round of funding and we can actually pay them, right? So you can put those people in the team page. You can also put your advisors, your partners. If you've been through any sort of incubation program, acceleration program, this all helps add credibility. So you can highlight those people as well. The ask, be specific. So don't have too many asks, just have one ask or one or two. Try to be very clear with your ask. If you have too many things, people just forget what it is. And you want to be specific. Don't just say, oh, we are looking for advice. You might say, oh, we're looking for marketing advice to help us create our first marketing campaign on Facebook, for example. Or we might say, oh, we're looking for fundraising advice to help us raise our first round of funding, which we plan on raising by this date. So be specific with your ask so that people know who they can introduce you to.
Just a question for you, sorry.
Yeah.
There's some angels and investors that are looking for just to give you money so you can grow their money.
Yes.
But is there an alternative motive to these individuals that maybe they're looking to maybe contribute in another way?
Yeah, good question. Investors, there are two main types, but any investor in the business usually has some interest in some sort of monetary return. Even if you're speaking to an impact investor. So impact investors are the breed of investors where they care a lot about, how your business will actually create positive impact. Maybe it's health, maybe it's community, maybe it's social justice, whatever it is. But if they're investing in companies, they will at some point care a little bit about monetary returns because otherwise they would just give to a charity or donation, right? So just keep that in mind. That's what I say. Does that answer the question?
Sorry, yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, so a few ways to position it, just thinking about some examples that I've seen. So one company I know, because he's directly raising from investors that he knows will be looking for an exit, and specifically he's looking for investors that want to exit within a certain time frame. So what happens is usually when you structure your round, you might strategically decide, okay, I'm going to raise money from investors that are patient, that won't rush me to grow my company and won't push me to sell my company within 5 years or anything like that. And if that's the case, then you would deliberately go out and find investors who have the reputation for being patient and being open to investing to companies that will take a while, right? If not, if you are trying to grow a company where you will scale very quickly and sell off within, let's say, 3 to 5 years, you might strategically say, oh, these are some of the recent acquisitions in our space. This company was bought by this amount by this other company. So then it helps them understand like who are the players in the acquisition market and what your company might be valued at, so they can understand how they will get their money back. So it just kind of speaks to like what they're interested by. Of course, if you're focused on impact investors, you might talk more about your impact metrics. I know Brienne, the one with the zero waste grocery store, she would talk about the amount of plastic waste that she has diverted from landfills. So that really gets her investors interested, right? So it really depends. Yeah. So if you've looked at the framework, this is the main body of the main pitch. So again, introduction, problem, solution, opportunity, why you. If you hit those 4 buckets, you would have done a good job with an initial pitch, right? You don't have to go into full detail. The appendix slides That's where you get a bit strategic. Because when you're designing your pitch deck, you typically design two pitch decks. One is your visual presentation, the other is your takeaway deck. If you have your takeaway deck, you can have more text. It has to be self-explanatory because people are not going to read the presenter notes. So it's okay to have a text-heavy readable deck. But if it's more for presentation, you want to keep it light, not too many text, more visual, more images. The appendix slide is where you actually really show people that you've thought about other things. So the other things you can include in the appendix slide include business model. So you might talk about business model in the main presentation. You might deliberately omit it and leave it for the appendix if you want to. You might have financials. You might have competition. Again, it really depends, right? If you're in a really competitive market and you know that investors want to ask this question, you might have to talk about it in the main presentation. If it's less of a concern, maybe you can leave it for the appendix. Your go-to-market strategy. How will you launch? How will you get your first customers? Maybe your tech, other things that they might care about. So what they might care about really depends on your business. Maybe they care about industry trends. Maybe they care about IP. Maybe they care about, other companies that have been acquired, other companies that have done the same thing and failed. So you might have to address some of these things. It really depends. So these are things that you put for the appendix. But the idea is when you're thinking about what goes into the appendix and what Q&A to deal with, you don't have to have all the answers. So that's the good news. Your goal is when people are asking you questions, you should be able to answer 7 to 8 out of 10 questions because no one is ever going to have all the answers. And investors know that as well. They know that if you have a good answer to everything, they know that you're bullshitting them, right? So your goal is if you don't have a good answer, just say, great question, we don't know. But let me get back to you on that. And then your goal is to actually get back to them. So your target should be to follow up with them within at least 3 days. And that just really shows that you're interested. So other high-level pitching things, I'm not going to touch too heavily on this, is for most competitions or when you're pitching to an investor, there's no points for participation. So whoever is the best communicator should do the entire pitch. I see people try to tag team it, try to have different people in their team come up on stage. It really makes it distracting. Don't do that. Whoever is the best communicator, do the entire pitch. Have your team ready for standby if they might have technical questions, but don't try to mix things up. It just makes it really distracting. Public speaking, some people get really uncomfortable by it, but I find that the more you worry, the more your worries will become reality, right? So as a matter of fact, like the less you worry, the better of a job you'll do. So don't stress too much about it. Power posing, this is a great one. That's a great TED Talk on this, where what was her name? I don't remember the name of the speaker. But anyways, the main lesson from the TED Talk is that you can actually power pose in private before you give a presentation, and your physical pose will actually influence how you actually feel. It'll give you more confidence as well. So do this if it helps. Other things to pay attention to, these are a bit harder and it will require more practice over time. You're maintaining eye contact with your audience, using open gestures, using open palms upwards rather than pointing at people or palms down, making sure you incorporate some movement. You're not just standing still, you're moving around the stage. Depending on where you're standing as well, certain things will influence it as well. Making sure you have the right expressions. So these kind of things more granular, but the way you can start to improve it is recording your speeches. So if you're going to an event, if you're pitching in public, get a friend to record you and just rewatch yourself so that you can see, what are there certain filler words that you're using. Like I myself, I know I tend to always say really or so or So are there filler words? Are you making the wrong gestures, or are you standing still too often, or are you not smiling or not engaging in eye contact? So these kind of things you can kind of see when you actually record. The other things to focus on is if you really want to fine tune your speech, then volume, tone, pacing, that really helps influence how you tell the story as well. Some people have asked, like, what about humor? How do I engage the audience? Can I ask questions? Sorry, just Henry, quickly, yes, I will be sharing the slides, and this session is being recorded as well, so you can watch the replay. So humor, you can use humor, but you have to be very careful with humor in your presentation. My recommendation is if you have to use humor, or if you want to, the best type of humor to use is self-deprecating humor. because that way it doesn't come across as being too awkward. If you try to make them the butt of the joke, then sometimes it can become a bit awkward, or if people don't get it, it becomes awkward. If you use self-deprecating humor, another thing that happens is you use the pratfall effect as well. People feel more comfortable when they are listening to someone who's presenting and they feel that the presenter is human as well. If you come across as too perfect, then people are intimidated by you, even investors. And that is not necessarily a good thing, right? So think strategically how you can position yourself in humor. So key takeaways, think about what is the jobs to be done, what's the motivation for your customer. Think about who will use it versus who will pay for it. Sometimes they are one and the same, sometimes they might be different. So for example, in Sarah's case, for example, Sarah is creating a platform that helps people with their careers. Maybe the job seeker might want to use it, but maybe the person paying for it might be the companies. So user and the customer might be different, or it might be the same. So just give some thought to that, because if they are different, you have to be able to paint a clear picture of value for your customer as well, not just for your user. Tell the story if you can. Highlight realistic progress and lessons that you learned. That is one of the key things to highlight in your pitch deck. What is your traction? What's your progress? And try to exude confidence and clarity, even if you are not confident, even if you don't have all the answers. So those are some of the key takeaways. Just to wrap it up, this is one of the workshops. We have another one coming up next on this Thursday on non-manipulative sales techniques. This session on Thursday is actually going to be a pre-recorded session. I was planning on doing it live, but I have a class to teach and I have to be there for the class. And next week for Startup Week, next week is Vancouver Startup Week. So for those of you who are in Vancouver, or even if you're not, it's completely virtual. It's going to be online. There are a whole bunch of workshops happening all the way from September 28th till September 30th. They're all virtual. I'm running a session on how to create a sales and marketing strategy. There's one on that Thursday on how to find co-founders as well. And then I'm actually organizing a hackathon happening the next weekend. So it's called the Do Good Business Challenge. So if you have an idea that can benefit any retail related business, or if it's a COVID related idea, you're welcome to participate in the hackathon, pitch your idea, form a team. There are some companies that are participating in the hackathon as well. So WeWork is one. There's YVR Prep, which is a commissary kitchen. There's Nada, the grocery store I talked about, Growing City. So these could be your first customers as well. So if you're looking for some pilot customers, could be a good place to kind of test your idea out. So yeah, that's the hackathon is coming up. Here's my information. If you need the slides, just send me an email. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But otherwise, feel free to jump off mute if you have any questions. Happy to answer. I'll hang around for a bit.
Yeah, Chen, this is very helpful. Thank you so much. And then,
no problem.
Yeah.
A great presentation, a lot of information, and I'll be definitely emailing you. And I want to be part of that that hackathon. That sounds so interesting.
This is quite a pleasant surprise. We attended some previous seminars. Sometimes we did not get much out, but this one is really what we were looking for. Actually, yeah, it's more than what we were hoping.
Yeah,
for. This is wonderful. Yeah,
thank you. I'm happy to hear that. I am an entrepreneur like you as well. So I've been through those many workshops where people like tell you what to do, but they don't show you how to do it. And I'm not a fan of those kind of workshops. So I hope that my workshop is a bit different, and I'm glad that you took a lot of good value out of it.
Excellent.
So much.
Thank
you.
Yeah. Well, do stay connected. I have a whole bunch of other workshops. I have a lot of recordings as well. So I used to be really deep in this topic of fundraising, sales. So any questions you have related to startups, I'm happy to chat with you, happy to bounce some ideas around, happy to see if I can help. Yeah.
I'm sure we will come to your seminars again.
Great. No worries, Daniel. Daniel, I was just telling everyone else as well, the session is recorded and I'm setting up the slides. So just shoot me an email and I can send you the details. Great. Otherwise, that's it. If no direct questions, I can end the session. All right. Have
Hi,
a good
team.
evening. Yeah. Oh, Sarah. Yes. Thanks for reminding me. We
Yeah,
will stay on the call after.
yeah, can I have 10 minutes to chat?